Hello, and welcome to Anime Audio Commentary. Today I'll be commenting on episode 13 of The Great Jahy Will Not Be Defeated. If you'd like to watch along, then start watching now. So last we left off, Jahy ended up finding a neat little lump of mana crystal, and it seems like she's decided to reward herself by going to the beach, which, strikes me as a bit odd considering, she doesn't exactly have the money to just blow off work and go to a luxury beach resort, as the narrator claims. I'm wondering if she's here on work or something, or if her magnanimous boss has brought her along on a vacation. Like Jahy's enjoying herself, enjoying the sun and the surf and all that, but surely the other shoe's gotta drop, right? Case in point, I guess. Alright, so there we have it. They just happen to have a beach shack, which, kind of puts me in mind of Squid Girl. So, I do have to wonder, we're seeing a lot of the Demon Lord in the opening, so I'm wondering when she's gonna show up. But I'm guessing probably not this episode, seeing as how the title is clearly mentioning Druj. And it was something like Druj is not happy, which I guess I wouldn't be happy if I were not invited to a beach vacation. Although it seems like this isn't really what that is, Oh boy, Jahy's just talking herself into no lunch. Like, that's never a good place to be. Especially when, this is like a relative of your boss who you should probably be kind of nice to, and, the uncle has a reputation for cooking, so it would seem. Ooh. So she's earned her own nickname, but, Oh dear indeed. This is one of those problems about getting older. Like, sometimes your back just starts acting up on you, It's one of those things you really neglect until it starts causing a problem, and when it does, it is agonizing. So, unfortunately, without, the boss's uncle, then it kind of falls to all of them. Between the boss to cook, the landlord to sell things, and, Jahy to probably do whatever is left over. It is also interesting that on such a nice day, there is no one on the beach. And I guess the prospect of jellyfish is what's doing it, but just because there's jellyfish doesn't mean you can't enjoy the sand, right? It's like, yeah, jellyfish will sting you, and that's, like, really not good and something to be avoided. But, surely you can just enjoy the sunlight and the warmth, right? So I guess the trouble is, the boss's uncle's shop is in a bit of a rough patch between the inclement weather and now the jellyfish, at least Jahy's happy because all this concentrated misfortune must mean, you know, a gigantic mana crystal, but something tells me this isn't going to be the case. You know, I mean, if anything, I feel like it's the mana crystal she's currently wearing that's causing the trouble. Oh dear. Surely Jahy won't go... Oh. Yeah, she's gonna get, like, riddled by jellyfish. You know, what little I know about jellyfish and the problems they can cause, like, there's really only one unsavory method for dealing with them. And fortunately, it hasn't come down to it yet, but, like, what would Jahy do were she stung? Like, could she go through with it herself, or would she rely on someone else to do it? You know, I feel like she would not allow either the boss or the landlord to administer the cure. And, man, that's a really loaded statement. I do have to feel a little bit bad for Jahy, however, because she's essentially cooped up on this nice day. You know, notwithstanding the possibility of a mana crystal that she could collect, like, there is something almost uniquely unfortunate about being cooped up inside having to work on a really nice day. Now, unfortunately, it seems like there's trouble in paradise. You know, everything can't be perfect all the time. I'm wondering if, Oh, okay. I was gonna say, surely it's above Jahy's pay grade to get involved, but, you know, if the mana crystal is bad enough to cause spontaneous arguments, then it must be potent indeed. And to also suddenly cause, like, a massive torrential downpour. You know, I feel like we're being set up for a little switcheroo here. The switcheroo being, it's Jahy's mana crystal that she currently has that's causing all this trouble, rather than a new, hitherto undiscovered gigantic shard. Now, I've never been a lifeguard, and I don't know much about the rules of lifeguarding and pool safety and all that, but I feel like for Jahy to go out into the ocean in the rain, like, that's, not good. Because there aren't any signs of thunder or lightning yet. Yet being the operative word, but I wouldn't put it past Jahy to get absolutely struck by lightning. It would be deserved in a way. So in a weird sort of way, Jahy's being benevolent and helpful, you know, helping a poor kid who is drifting out a little further than he probably should. Oh. Okay, so yeah. I guess Jahy is now a de facto lifeguard helping people stung by the jellyfish. I didn't realize a jellyfish sting would make you go numb, and if you're just covered in them, like, that's a really bad thing to have happen while you're swimming, especially in water that's deeper than you are tall. So I guess Jahy's just like an all-purpose lifeguard now, saving people from sharks and capsized boats. It's a shame she's doing all this work without any pay. Yeah, you know, unfortunately, I think there's a bit of a problem with Jahy's methodology. You know, sometimes bad things just happen. I like how she's being treated as though she's just, like, playing in the ocean and she doesn't want to go home. As if she doesn't have, like, a more important reason. But that said... Okay. It's interesting that the landlord of all people is like Jahy's turning down ice cream to keep looking for that mana crystal. Not that she knows the mana crystal's the object of Jahy's quest, but, like, just the idea that she'd stay out when it's dark and all that. Whoa, okay. I guess Jahy was right after all. It's not just one, but I guess a whole bunch of little ones, I suppose. You know, I guess that makes a little bit of sense. It was not one giant crystal, but a bunch of little ones, and that's why they were kind of hard to find. But I guess before I got distracted by that, I was just going to say it's interesting that it was the landlord of all people who was keying into Jahy and what she's up to and how this is sort of unusual behavior. The real question now is, where does Jahy stand in comparison to Druj? Because I feel like Druj certainly has a whole lot more, but, you know, a couple buckets worth of shards, like, that's not nothing, you know? Of course, it is immediately going to Jahy's head. She's thinking, oh, I can fight the magical girl on even terms now, but, you know, that's just not true. And however nice it might be to have a couple buckets worth of shards, she also has to forego pay for this. So, you know, who's the real winner here? So I guess, in a way, she's done a lot of good work, but, you know, none of it is really to her benefit. At best, it's kind of like a neutral day. So I guess, meanwhile, things are going well for Druj, with profits being up this quarter and being invited to see the chairman. I mean, I was kind of under the impression that she was the end-all be-all boss, but maybe that's not the case. And I guess it is interesting that despite everything seemingly going well, you know, she's, per the narrator, haunted by sorrow. I guess this has to do with not meeting her actual goals and the perception that she's behind Jahy, but, you know, it's one of those things where it's just like, not nearly as true as she thinks it is. And speaking of perceptions versus reality, like, Jahy's planning a final battle. Like, that just won't go well, you know? Like, there's no universe in which Jahy wins as she is, you know? So I feel like maybe Jahy would do well to not dismiss her, you know, her lackey so flippantly. I guess, you know, there we go, like, she's under the impression that, like, you know what, I can afford to pander to my lackey. Like, So I'm wondering if this is going to inspire jealousy in Druj, that like, oh, I've got things to do. Like, yeah, you can sit next to me, but like... Okay, no, it's inspiring awe instead. Understandable, I guess, that Druj is being treated like, you know, an actual person now rather than an article of furniture or a minion. Yeah, you know, it is nice that Jahy is going out of her way for Druj, but maybe, you know, maybe baby steps, you know, maybe, like, work up to sitting on the same bench. As ridiculous as that sounds. So I guess I'm wondering, is Jahy going to disclose her planned showdown with the magical girl? Because I feel like if she were to share that, you know, maybe Druj would, like, tell her to knock it off. You know, probably not. You know, she still thinks Jahy is, like, darn near omnipotent, but... Ooh. Alright, this is an interesting wrinkle. Obviously, Jahy's talking about herself and how much she hates work, but, you know, by saying, like, if all you do is work, you're gonna be miserable. Like, Druj is taking this as an expression of care for her well-being. Because it certainly seems as though Druj is working herself to the bone. You know, she's getting great results, with profits being up this quarter, but... You know, there's only so much profits can go up by before it becomes entirely meaningless on a personal level, you know? Okay, so I guess Jahy is crossing the line into actually praising Druj. There's gonna be some knock-on consequence of this, you know? So I guess the interesting thing is that Druj is even unsatisfied with this. And I'm wondering if this is, like one of those scenarios where, like, a dog chases a car and finally catches up to it and then doesn't know what to do. Because, like, sometimes getting what you want isn't as good as working towards getting what you want, if that makes sense. So, this is kind of an interesting reaction from Jahy, wondering if she said something wrong here. And of course, she's more concerned about her own reputation. Have I been found out that I am a fraud? But at the same time, concern for someone else is an interesting novelty for Jahy. And I feel like she could probably do a little bit more of that. Okay, yeah, so Jahy's clearing it up. It's like, look, I don't want you to feel obligated to do anything extra. But that's clearly at odds with how Jahy was before and what Druj expected. And this sort of, like, absolutely despondent expression is sort of evidence in my mind that Druj is on the verge of just, like, shattering entirely. I mean, Jahy's wondering, like, which one of my lies did she figure out? Like, none, in all likelihood, even though I don't think it would be hard to find out any of them. But at the same time, maybe Jahy would benefit from being honest. And, paradoxically, maybe she would benefit from just treating Druj a little bit worse. I mean, it seems like that's what Druj is kind of getting at, almost. Like, I feel like... Oh. Well, that's one way to put it, I suppose. So I'm wondering if this is going to be a moment of realization for Jahy. It's like, oh, is that how I treated you? Okay, well, It's interesting that Druj is so absolutely broken that, like, being treated nicely is uncomfortable. I guess, if nothing else, it's easier for Jahy, because, like, I feel like you can just sort of treat her dismissively and everything would be okay, Ooh. Okay, Druj is actually hitting on something interesting here, that Jahy is assimilating and acting more and more human and being less like her old self. That's interesting. I thought she was going to take the angle of, like, you have other underlings, but, no, it's interesting she took the assimilation angle. And, it is true when you get down to it. Jahy has been acting more and more kind to people when she normally wouldn't have. But it's also kind of interesting that Jahy isn't, putting on a performance for her. She's just actually disgusted. Yeah, I guess this is why, as a boss, you really have to understand your employees. Like, maybe you don't have to meet them halfway, but, like, you need to manage them in the way that's best for them as well as the best for you. And in this case, sometimes that just involves being a little mean sometimes. I guess it's kind of interesting in the way that, like, people can get used to anything. Jahy's so used to being a loser and Druj being successful that, like, the roles almost sort of reversed. Even if Druj is nowhere near suited to being in charge, at least in terms of Jahy. And I guess now that I think about it, Jahy's been, like, a little less haughty than usual. I mean, it's sort of coming back now that she recognizes she's been lacking, but I don't know. I feel like if I were Jahy, I'd probably, like, make it a point to just, like, pick on Druj a little bit each day just to maintain the pecking order. Ooh. Okay, so Jahy is denying that she's grown a little attached to humans and grown kinder and all that. Like, we know she has. I really don't think it's up for debate, but I guess if she has to tell a little lie to reassure her underling, then so be it. I'm wondering if this is going to become, insofar as there is a plot, an actual plot point. Man, Druj is a little bit more like Jahy than I think she'd be willing to admit, because she just left her chauffeur there that entire time for this talk. Like, in reality, it's probably not that long, but, Alright, so here you go. A little bit of a follow-up with those extra little mana crystals. And it seems like Jahy is walking to face the magical girl. And, it's meant to be dramatic, but now the boss is saying, like, ooh, don't forget, like, this food and bandages. The boss doesn't really seem to understand that this is a battle to the death, at least in Jahy's mind. And something tells me, despite her intentions to decide things once and for all, maybe bringing a bunch of mana crystals to the magical girl isn't exactly as good an idea as she thinks it is. Sure, it might augment her magic, but I feel like she's just gonna lose. Alright, well that's it for this episode. If you've enjoyed it, then by all means, tune in for the next one. See you, Space Cowboy.